There is a part of you that quietly follows you wherever you go. It stands just out of sight, shaping how you think, how you feel, and how you react, even when you are unaware of it. Sometimes you sense it in the middle of a conversation when you suddenly feel defensive or irritated. Sometimes it shows itself when you catch yourself saying something you did not plan to say. Other times, it whispers through silence, through the heaviness that lingers after a long day or the strange ache that has no clear name. Carl Jung once said, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." The shadow he spoke of is not an enemy hiding in the dark. It is simply the unseen side of your personality, the part of you that holds everything you have turned away from, forgotten, or denied. These could be emotions you were told were too much, thoughts that felt uncomfortable, or memories that you did not know how to face. When we grow up, we learn what the world rewards and what it rejects. To be accepted, we start showing only the parts of ourselves that feel safe. We become careful with what we say, cautious with how we feel. Little by little, the pieces that others do not fit into that image get pushed away. But what we bury does not disappear. It waits patiently beneath the surface, shaping how we see ourselves and how we experience life. You might notice it when you feel a sudden rush of anger that doesn't make sense, or when you judge someone harshly for something that secretly frightens you about yourself. These are the quiet moments when your shadow reaches out, asking to be noticed. It does not want control. It wants understanding. It wants to be part of the whole picture of who you are. This journey into the shadow is not about fixing yourself. It is not about erasing your mistakes or covering your flaws. It is about bringing honesty to the parts of you that have lived too long in silence. Jung believed that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And he was right. But he also believed that meeting what is hidden within us leads to true freedom. When you stop pretending that your darkness isn't there, you begin to see your light more clearly too. Take a moment to breathe. Let go of the need to figure everything out. This is not a story about judgment or guilt. It is an invitation to turn gently toward yourself, to see what has been unseen, to meet what has been waiting for you all along. Somewhere in the quiet space between who you are and who you pretend to be, your shadow stands ready to be recognized. And when you finally look its way, you may find not something frightening, but something deeply human. Something that has been longing all this time simply to belong. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. You see your face, your expression, the familiar lines that make you who you are. But if you look long enough, past the surface, you might feel something stir beneath the image. A quiet awareness that what you see is not the full story. Beneath the reflection lives another presence, subtle yet powerful, holding every part of you that has been denied a voice. That hidden reflection is your shadow. Carl Jung once wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." What he meant is that the shadow holds the pieces of ourselves we have rejected, not because they are evil or wrong, but because at some point we learned they were unacceptable. Maybe someone told you to be strong, so you learned to hide your fear. Maybe you were told to be kind, so you buried your anger. Maybe you were praised for being calm, so you silenced your excitement. Every time we pushed away an emotion, a truth, or a desire, we built another layer of the shadow. The mirror does not lie. It shows what is visible and what is missing. The hidden reflection carries your frustrations, your unspoken envy, your untold stories. And yet, it also carries your strength, your courage, and your capacity for honesty. What we suppress does not vanish. It gathers power in the dark, shaping how we respond to life. That is why sometimes you feel confused by your own reactions, why something small can suddenly feel enormous, or why someone's words can touch a nerve you didn't know was exposed. The shadow does not reveal itself through calm logic. It appears through emotion. It arrives in irritation, in defensiveness, in sudden judgments. These are not failures of character. They are reflections in the hidden mirror, showing you what still needs to be seen. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The world often becomes the mirror that reveals the shadow we carry within. To face your shadow, you must first be willing to look honestly at what appears, not to criticize it, but to recognize it. It takes quiet courage to admit, "That reaction was mine," or "That fear belongs to me." Yet every time you do, the mirror clears a little more. The image becomes fuller, more real. The light begins to touch what once lived only in darkness. This process is not comfortable, and it is not quick. The shadow resists exposure because it was born from rejection. It expects you to turn away again. But if you can stand still long enough to truly look, to meet your reflection without judgment, you begin to notice something remarkable. Beneath the shame, beneath the defensiveness, there is a pulse of life. These hidden parts are not broken. They are waiting. They hold energy, creativity, and insight that have been locked away. Think of it this way. The shadow is not an intruder. It is the keeper of your completeness. It guards the pieces of you that were once too painful to carry in the light. Meeting it does not mean surrendering to it. It means understanding it. And understanding is the beginning of peace. The mirror never stops reflecting. Each day it offers a chance to see yourself more clearly. So the next time you feel that sudden spark of emotion, instead of pushing it aside, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to show me? The answer may not come right away, but the act of asking opens a door. As you begin to walk through that door, the reflection grows softer, warmer, more familiar. You start to realize that what you once feared was simply a part of you waiting for kindness. The hidden mirror was never your enemy. It was your guide, inviting you to look a little deeper, to meet yourself with a gaze that finally sees everything. There are moments in life when you act in ways that surprise you. You say something sharp and feel regret almost immediately. You withdraw from someone for no clear reason. You overreact to a small mistake, or feel anger that seems larger than the situation. Later, when things calm down, you wonder, why did I do that? It feels as if another part of you took over for a moment. An unseen force that spoke before you could think. That is the shadow taking the wheel. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The shadow influences us in ways we often cannot see. It shapes our decisions, our emotions, our patterns, and our responses. It acts like an invisible hand on the steering wheel, guiding our direction while we believe we are in full control. But this hidden driver is not a stranger. It is you. It is the part of you that has been waiting to be noticed, and when it cannot find your attention through calm reflection, it calls out through action. When you lose your temper over something small, the shadow may be reminding you of an old wound you never allowed yourself to feel. When you avoid something important, it might be your shadow protecting you from a fear that was once too painful to face. When you criticize others harshly, it may be echoing the criticism you learned to turn on yourself. The shadow does not act to harm you. It acts to express what you have refused to acknowledge. Its language is emotion, and emotion demands to be felt. You can think of these moments as messages rather than mistakes. They are opportunities to see what is really going on beneath the surface. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." The pain of seeing your own shadow is the pain of honesty. It shows you the parts of your behavior that were never random, but deeply rooted in something you have not yet healed. This realization is not comfortable, but it is freeing. Because once you see what has been driving you, you can finally take your hands back and steer with awareness. The shadow often emerges most clearly under stress, rejection, or fear. These are the moments when you feel cornered, when your defenses rise without permission. You might hear yourself say things you do not mean or behave in ways that feel foreign to you. The shadow thrives in silence and control. It steps forward when you have ignored your feelings for too long. When it takes the wheel, it is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that something inside you has gone unheard for too long. The key is not to punish yourself when this happens. Judgment only strengthens the shadow's grip. Instead, try to pause afterward, when calm begins to return, and ask gently, "What was I trying to protect? What pain was I avoiding?" The answers may not come easily, but even asking the question begins to loosen the hold. Awareness itself begins to change the pattern. Jung believed that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. We often blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck for our struggles because it feels safer than admitting that something within us is steering the way. But facing the shadow does not mean blaming yourself. It means becoming honest enough to see your own influence. It means accepting that your reactions come from somewhere real inside you, and that by understanding them, you gain power over them. When you become aware of the shadow's presence, you start to notice it before it takes over. You begin to sense the tension rising, the quickening pulse, the defensive thoughts forming. And in that moment of awareness, you have a choice. You can pause. You can breathe. You can ask yourself, "Is this really me? Or is this the part of me that has been waiting to be heard?" That pause is a moment of transformation. Over time, as you grow more conscious of your shadow, it loses its power to drive you blindly. The emotions still come, but they no longer control you. They become information instead of commands. You start to see that every strong reaction carries a story, and every story has a lesson waiting inside it. The shadow teaches not by punishment, but by reflection. Imagine learning to share the wheel instead of fighting for control. You sit beside your shadow, no longer afraid of it. You listen when it speaks, you learn from what it reveals, and together you begin to move through life with greater understanding. This is not a quick process. It takes patience, humility, and compassion. But as you practice, you begin to notice something remarkable. The more you understand your hidden self, the less power it has to surprise you. Your life begins to feel more steady, more honest. You start responding instead of reacting. And one day, when something unexpected happens and the shadow stirs, you will recognize it with calm awareness. You will say to yourself, "I see you." And that recognition, the simple act of seeing, will be enough to keep your hand steady on the wheel. There are moments when the world grows quiet, and you can finally hear something deeper stirring within you. It might come after an argument when your emotions have burned out and only silence remains. It might come late at night when you lie awake, your thoughts circling the same unspoken truths. Or it might appear in the middle of an ordinary day, in a sudden wave of sadness or unease that you cannot explain. This quiet presence beneath the noise is your shadow speaking, It does not use words. It speaks in feelings, in restlessness, in the weight that sits behind your smile. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." The shadow is what you find when you begin to look inside. It is the voice that has been waiting behind your constant doing, your endless distractions, your rush to move forward. Most of us fill our days with noise because silence can feel uncomfortable. But silence is where the shadow lives. And if you stay long enough to listen, it begins to reveal what you have avoided. The voice of the shadow is gentle but persistent. It might whisper, "You are tired of pretending," or "You are afraid to fail," or perhaps, "You miss the person you used to be." These are not accusations. They are truths you have buried because the world taught you that vulnerability was weakness. The shadow does not want to shame you. It wants to remind you that your emotions are part of your humanity. When you finally stop resisting them, they become guides instead of weights. Listening to your shadow is not about sinking into sadness or reliving old wounds. It is about noticing. It is about being honest with yourself when you would rather look away. Jung believed that there is no light without shadow and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. To deny your feelings is to deny your wholeness. When you listen to your discomfort with compassion, it begins to soften. What once felt heavy starts to feel like truth taking shape. Imagine sitting quietly after a long day, letting the noise of the world fade. Beneath your thoughts, beneath the worries and plans, there is a deeper rhythm, a steady pulse of feeling that has always been there. Perhaps you feel tension in your chest, or a heaviness in your stomach, or a wave of emotion rising without reason. Instead of pushing it away, try asking it a question. What are you trying to tell me? At first, there may be no clear answer. The shadow does not rush to speak. It waits for patience, for gentleness. But the act of asking begins a dialogue, a conversation between the person you show to the world and the person who waits inside. As you begin to listen, you might notice that the shadow's voice often carries messages of care rather than harm. Your anger might be protecting you from being hurt again. Your sadness might be showing you what truly matters. Your guilt might be reminding you of values you have forgotten. Even your envy can point you toward the life you secretly wish to create. The shadow does not exist to destroy. It exists to restore balance. It tries to bring awareness where denial has lived for too long. The more you listen, the more the shadow changes shape. It stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a teacher. Jung wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." When you learn to hear your own hidden emotions without fear, you become gentler with others. You see their struggles not as threats, but as reflections of the same human complexity that lives within you. Compassion grows naturally out of self-understanding. Listening to the shadow is an act of courage because it asks you to face feelings that you cannot control. Yet in doing so, you begin to discover a deeper peace, the peace that comes from no longer running away. Awareness does not erase pain, but it transforms it. What once controlled you begins to serve you, offering insight instead of confusion. There is wisdom in stillness. Beneath the constant motion of daily life lies a quiet truth, always waiting. You cannot hear it when you are filling every silence with distraction. But when you finally stop and listen, even for a few moments, you begin to recognize the voice beneath the noise. It is not a stranger's voice. It is your own, honest, steady, and kind. It is the part of you that has always known what you need. waiting patiently for you to listen. In that moment of listening, something inside begins to shift. The tension softens. The noise fades. You begin to understand that the shadow was never trying to frighten you. It was trying to bring you home to yourself. There comes a point in this journey when you realize the goal is not to fight the shadow, but to meet it with kindness. For so long, you may have treated your hidden self as something to fix or hide. Yet the shadow has always been asking for one thing: compassion. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." To do this means standing still long enough to see your fear, anger, and shame, and choosing not to turn away. It means saying, "You belong here too." When you meet yourself this way, what once felt dark begins to soften. The anger that used to overwhelm you starts to calm when it feels understood. The shame that once silenced you loses its power when met with care. Meeting yourself with kindness does not mean ignoring mistakes or pretending everything is fine. It means looking at yourself with honesty and patience. You can face your regrets and say, "I see why I did that, and I'm learning." You can tell your fear, "You're safe now." Each time you do, the shadow becomes less threatening and more human. Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Kindness allows you to choose to become whole. When you bring compassion to every part of yourself, the calm and the restless, the proud and the afraid, you no longer live divided. The light within you doesn't erase the darkness. It reveals that both belong. True kindness takes courage. The world often tells us to be harder, faster, stronger, but healing begins when you soften. When you say to yourself, "I have done my best. I am allowed to begin again." Over time, you notice small changes. You speak to yourself more gently. You forgive yourself sooner. You listen to your emotions without judgment. The shadow becomes not an enemy, but a guide, a reminder that peace is found not by denying who you are, but by accepting it. As Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. To meet yourself with kindness is to bring light to every corner inside you and to understand that nothing within you is unworthy of care. When you finally allow that truth to settle, you stop fighting yourself and start living as a whole human being. Imagine walking along a path in the evening light. You notice your shadow beside you, quiet and steady. It no longer hides behind you, and it no longer leads the way. It walks with you. This is what it means to live in harmony with yourself. When you stop fighting what is hidden, you begin to feel whole. The shadow loses its power to control you because it has been given a place to belong. Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. To become who you are, you must first meet every part of yourself with honesty. So the next time you feel something rise within you, anger, fear, shame, or sorrow, do not turn away. That is not darkness calling. That is you, asking to be known. And when you finally answer, life begins to feel quieter, deeper, and more your own.